Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today. This is your primetime destination news. Newsmakers talking points, the big talking point, the Amrit Kal economy. Is that simply a slogan or does that mirror the reality? The state of the Indian economy. K. Subramanian, India's executive director to the IMF, will join me. The former chief economic advisor. Also, Chandrababu Naidu's arrest is turning into a political fight, vendetta or a fair probe. Tonight we'll be joined by the son of the former Andhra chief minister, among other guests. But first, as always, it's time for the 9 headlines at 9. A Nipah virus alert now sounded in Kerala. Union Health Minister confirms 2 Nipah virus deaths in Kerala. State Health Minister chairs review meet. Warning issue. Retail inflation in the month of August dips to 6.83% on the back of decline in vegetable prices, but remains well above RBI's comfort zone. Economic growth steady as industrial output improves to 5.7%. Another Tamil Nadu minister fuels the Sanatan Rao fire. DMK MP A. Raja calls Hinduism a menace for the world. BJP hits back, says India bloc formed to attack Sanatan Dharma. Supreme Court declines centre's request, refers pleas against sedition law to a constitution bench, says new bill to replace IPC can't affect past cases. A new uniform for the parliament staff triggers a political storm ahead of a special session next week. Opposition trains guns at BJP, questions the lotus print on the new uniform. BJP claims Congress distracting nation from G20 success. Telugu Desam President Chandrababu Naidu moves the High Court seeking directions to quash an FIR registered against him for his alleged involvement in a skill development scam case. DMC MP Nusrat Jahan appears before the ED in a real estate scam. Nusrat is an accused in a case of a builder cheating home buyers. Cow vigilante Monu Manesar sent to 14-day custody after being arrested from Manesar under charges of instigating the new violence. And Apple to unveil its new series of iPhone shortly. A made-in-India iPhone could be the apple of everyone's eyes. But our top story tonight, and the breaking story that we have, a Nipah virus alert has been sounded in Kerala's Kozhikode district. Union Health Minister has now confirmed 2 Nipah virus deaths in Kerala, a state which has gone through a similar epidemic a few years ago. State Health Minister has now chaired a review meet amidst growing concerns over the Nipah crisis. Remember, this is a very contagious disease and in the past has spread havoc. So Nipah virus returning to Kerala, and that has caused concern after those 2 deaths have been reported in Kerala's Kozhikode district. So that's the big story that's breaking at the moment. We'll be getting you more details on that, but for now the information we have is that the State Health Minister is chairing a review meeting to gauge the extent of what is happening on the ground in Kerala. Nipah virus alert has been sounded there. Well, another alert in a way is that the consumer inflation numbers are out, and inflation is down from 7.44% in July, where it had peaked, to a lower 6.83% in August. This is primarily because vegetable prices are down now. Rural inflation, though, remains higher than urban figures, that coming down marginally from 7.63% in July to 7.02%. The decline is much sharper in urban areas, primarily driven by the fact that vegetable prices are down. Economic growth figures also remaining steady. As I said, inflation down, but still above the RBI's comfort zone of 6%. It is, of course, one of the major economic challenges that the Modi government will be facing in an election year. Right through this week, especially at G20, there's been much talk that India is the rising economy of the world, and the Prime Minister has spoken of Amrit Kal over the next 25 years, saying India will soon be the world's 3rd largest economy. The question, of course, is what does this mean for you and me? Is this a lot of hype, or is an Amrit Kal economy a slogan, or is it a real possibility? Is India a rising economy on the march? That's a question I posed to someone who's been monitoring the Indian economy very closely for the last few years. He's now the IMF director, executive director for India in Washington, D.C. He was here for the G20 summit. Former chief economic advisor, Dr. K. Subramanian, is my special guest. Hello and welcome to this India Today special. India, it would seem, has been the flavor of the season in the backdrop of the G20 summit. But are we truly a rising economic power as is being projected? Or are there many mountains left to climb? Joining us now is someone who has a ringside view from a global perspective to what's happening in India and the world. I'm joined by Dr. K. Subramanian, the Executive Director of the IMF for India, as well as the former Chief Economic Advisor. Appreciate your joining us, Dr. Subramanian. Good to have you here in India.
My pleasure, Rajdeep.
The G20 summit has created a lot of buzz around rising India. The fact that we've emerged from the 10th largest economy in the world to the 5th, and the hope that we will reach 3rd in a few years. How much of that hype do you believe is deserved? And how much does it conceal certain other concerns in your view?
Rajdeep, you would recall the interview that we had just after the first quarter of 2020. At that time, I had said that there's going to be not only a V-shaped recovery after the pandemic-induced lockdown, that the economic growth in India will be very, very good. So it is not just that we required a G20 to basically tell the world that India is rising. India's growth, if you look at 7.2% last year, and when the revised numbers will come in, it is my estimation that the growth will be closer to 7.5%. With the first quarter growth being 7.8%, India has been, doing really well. And the G20, in particular, really signals the stature that India has now come to command in the world, in the Committee of Nations. When you look at the fact that a unanimous declaration was signed, a very seminal proposal, and something that everybody agreed to, which is the corridor, the infrastructure corridor, which I have called it the new Silk Route, together with the India displaying leadership on financial inclusion, on the public digital infrastructure, and also on cryptocurrency. I think these are very, very important moves, clearly. So any doubts that people like you would have had should have been settled by now.
But I must still raise, my job is to raise the question. So I will continue to raise the question. Two doubts that emerge from what you just said. One, when you cite GDP numbers, the fact is those numbers also conceal possibly the reality that we've emerged from a low base. There are economists who say that if you discount the fact that we've emerged from a low base during the COVID years, go back to 2019-20, we are still at an average of 3.5 growth rate, which is a low to middling growth rate. So how much is that 7% plus conceal the fact that we are emerging from a very low base in the COVID years?
So, there are a few problems with this, Rajdeep. Firstly, and I'm sure you would have seen, I had written a piece in the Times of India where I had shown the growth not only for India but for the top 10 countries over a 3-year period, taking into account the base effect, taking into account the fact that during the pandemic year, every country, not only India, had a growth decline, and shown that India had the largest growth during this 3-year period over the top 10 economies. Point number one. Second point, I think you would you'd remember very well when we had made the prediction about the V-shaped recovery, people who basically didn't even believe it at that point in time. So if they are talking about now the base effect, and having at that time not believed that there will indeed be the base effect coming about because of the V-shaped recovery, I think you can't have it both ways.
Even the word V. Even the word V generates controversy. There are those who suggest it's more like K-shaped. There are certain areas where we've grown, other areas where we have not. I mean, indigenous manufacturing still hasn't perhaps picked up to the extent that one would like it to. Yeah. There are still question marks over certain sectors. So therefore, are you willing to concede that maybe rather than being gung-ho over a V-shaped recovery, it's a more gradual K-shaped recovery?
No, so actually, and I've said this before, Rajdeep, and I think it's important to repeat this, that this argument or this claim that the recovery is K-shaped is disingenuous, and I'll tell you why. Because even in any year, the best years or in a crisis year, growth across sectors is never uniform. Like the 5 fingers in a hand, they're actually of different sizes. If you take any year, it's not as if manufacturing, services and agriculture grow at the same rate. So, this is something that's an intrinsic feature of an economy always. So, just to then say that for the particular time of the pandemic, growth rates are different and therefore it's a K-shaped recovery, I think makes it very, very clear that the argument is disingenuous. Now, if you look at even specifically the crisis period, take the previous crisis, for instance, the global financial crisis. During that time, it was actually manufacturing, that did well. Services did not do as much. In fact, actually, it was the other way around. Now, that is also, people could have called that a K-shaped recovery or whatever it was. So my point here is that it is not a characteristic of just the COVID period. Any year you pick up, you show me a particular year, not only for India or any other economy where every sector has grown at the same rate, I will then stop calling myself an economist.
Because the fact is that when you throw numbers at us, particularly the GDP numbers, there are those who say those numbers do not give the complete picture of this country, A, because of the low base that I mentioned, B, also because they don't account for the unorganized agriculture sector, unorganized non-agriculture sector, which in a way is the one which has hurt the most in the post-COVID period.
Rajdeep, when I actually give you an argument, you mentioned about the base effect, and I actually told you the data that over a 3-year period, India, among the large economies, accounting for the base effect, has had the best growth. So please accept that argument and then let's move on. I think that claim is not on very solid ground. I think India indeed has displayed very good, growth out of recovery, out of COVID, because, and here I think it's not an accident that India has had actually such good performance, because we anticipated, unlike any of the other economies, that COVID is going to be a big supply side shock. And the measures that were taken actually were a good balance of both the demand and the supply side measures, which is why, in my, time where, because the twin crisis, both the COVID and the Ukraine war, you have advanced economies facing between 2.5 to 4 times their historical average inflation. India's inflation has been actually less than its historical average. So not only have we come out with very strong macroeconomic fundamentals, unlike the fragile 5 performance during the global financial crisis, we've also had very strong growth. So I don't think we needed a G20 as actually a proof of the recovery. G20, as I've said, is essentially just signaling the stature that India has now come to command in the global community.
I'll come to the G20 in a moment, but the unorganized non-agriculture sector is the one which is seen to have suffered the most in COVID times, led to unemployment, led to falling incomes. And there aren't signs yet of a complete recovery. Do you believe that will be a more slower recovery? That remains the major challenge going ahead.
So here, if you look at, and there are enough academic studies now, if you look at the paper by Dr. Arvind Panagaria, the former vice chairman of Niti Aayog, he's actually used data showing, the fact that recovery, if you separate by urban versus rural areas, looking at employment as well, recovery has indeed now been complete. If you look at the PLFS data, if you look at employment has already recovered beyond pre-COVID levels. So I think, when you let the data speak rather than go for particular narratives, I think the claims that you're making are clearly, they do not have any ground.
You mentioned G20 and the fact that the G20 in a sense reflects what you believe is India's emergence as a leading economy. Now, there will be those who will say, yes, we are the 5th largest economy in the world, but even among the G20, we have the lowest per capita income. That we are the country with the maximum number of poor. 16.4% of our population remains below the poverty line. The next is South Africa with about 6.4%. These are real concerns again going ahead. Inequalities remains a major concern.
No, look, here as well, I think let's go by so for a population of 1.4 billion, clearly, when you have a base like that, obviously per capita income in dollar terms, when you compare, actually will be, will be lower. But the right way to compare is to compare always using purchasing power parity, because the dollar, what it can purchase, let's say, in the US versus what it can do in India is different, right? And when you use purchasing power parity, India does not look, as sort of as behind in terms of per capita, when you come to look at that compared to other countries. That's point number one. Second, when you talk about inequality, I think, because of the inclusive nature of growth, especially through the digital infrastructure that India has created. Now we have more than 500 million bank accounts, and each of these bank accounts are being used by the poor. So through the use of the public digital infrastructure, India has been able to really make growth inclusive. And this is being shown, if I refer to the paper by Dr. Arvind Panagaria, where he actually shows that inequality, if anything, has actually declined during the last 3-4 years. Inequality has not gone up, and this is using the PLFS data. Again, so when you look at the data carefully, some of the claims actually, which are sort of narratives that are spun, I think do not have as much.
So you don't accept the fact that income inequalities remains the major challenge going ahead, that for a country like India, as we sort of, project ourselves to the world as this fastest growing economy, that will remain the big challenge. Even when I look income inequalities, and then I come to social sector, which is health and education. If you look at per capita investment in education, per capita income in health, we are the lowest still among the G20 countries. So critical areas still remain before we can truly claim to be, in a sense, the rising power that we now hope to become one day.
So I think, we have to be very careful here to not keep moving the targets here. First, when you started out, we actually were talking about the macroeconomics. We're talking about growth. I don't think anybody here is going to contend that there is no work to be done. Let's be very clear. When I'm talking about inequality, I'm talking about the change in inequality, because the narrative that a lot of, people, especially those that are sympathetic to your kind of arguments.
Let me
finish. Actually, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about those economists that are actually sympathetic to your kind of arguments. They basically contended that inequality is rising. I'm not saying inequality in terms of the level is something that we should not be working on. We certainly should be. But what I'm saying, when you look at the data and papers written by very credible people like Dr. Arvind Panagaria, during this 3-year period, inequality has not gone up. That is what I'm saying. I'm not saying inequality is something that we should not be working on.
Because there are papers also written by the likes of Professor Arun Kumar, Professor Malhotra, who have a very different perspective.
Why? Because those are actually based on data that are not reliable. The CMI data, the PLFS data, we know very well. It is created by the by the NSSO, which is tasked with the job of creating data for the country. CMI is private data, which I've said time and again. Even when good news comes on employment, I say that is unreliable. So, those papers that you're talking about are actually written with unreliable data. I don't trust the findings that come from there. Now, when it comes to social sector expenditure, I completely agree with you. We have work to do. And in fact, if you would recall, in the 2020-21 economic survey, we wrote a chapter on healthcare showing that we need to increase our spending. We need to do, clearly a lot. I don't think anybody, those of us who actually, really want to speak the truth on the economy, we're not saying that there is no work to be done. And what we are trying to say is that there is this class of, of perennial pessimists who keep moving the targets. When we say, okay, first they said, oh, growth is going to be terrible. There are going to be millions of people dying on the streets in India. When growth happens, they say, oh, what about this? I am trying to say that those of us who actually want to portray the truth on the economy, we want to tell them that actually don't keep moving targets. Let's acknowledge the good work that is done. That doesn't mean that there isn't more work to be done. There's absolutely more work to be done, but there's been absolutely very good work done.
So therefore, when you look at, let's say, the glass half empty theory of the perennial pessimists, as you call them, would you tell them that the real challenge that you also accept is ensuring that expenditure on health and education in particular, providing not just increasing literacy rates, but ensuring that you're able to provide quality education that makes them competitive for the new job market. That's going to be India's biggest challenge going ahead, skilling and ensuring greater investment in health and education.
So, see, here I think, I don't think any economist is going to go and claim that we actually have, done everything that needs to be done on education and healthcare. But let me remind, especially the viewers, that education and healthcare are actually not just the responsibility of the center. They're actually concurrent subjects, number one. Number two, when it comes to education, the solution is not more money, because our teachers, especially those in government, are paid well. And if you look at several papers, people like, Karthik Muralidharan and others have actually written, showing that it is the governance that needs to change, which is primarily a state level subject, number one. So, but again, I'm just saying, who needs to do the work? I'm not saying there isn't work to be done. On healthcare as well, I think while there's been significant improvement, and let me acknowledge, we on a per capita basis during COVID, I think we did really well by coming up with our own vaccine. I shudder to think about actually, let's say, in a different dispensation, the kind of policy paralysis that prevailed earlier, what would have been the situation? If the same COVID pandemic had happened in sort of such kind of dispensation, I think there would have been absolute mayhem. And I think that is important to actually recognize. In the spirit of, recognizing wherever good work has been done, I think we must say that too.
The other challenge, of course, which I briefly mentioned upon, was manufacturing. And since you quoted Arvind Panagriya more than once, his big concern is that the PLI schemes that the government has brought in, that we need to relook at some of them, that we need to ensure that somewhere customs duty hikes need to be reversed. We can't be protectionist in this new world. We're going to have to ensure that trade barriers are lifted. We're going to have to reach out to the world. Do you concede that perhaps that is another major challenge going ahead if we have to really compete with the global economies?
Yeah, on manufacturing, there is actually a lot of work still to be done. Let me explain, to our viewers, because this is something that's generated debate. Let me, in 1991, and allow me actually to explain this here, please don't interrupt. In 1991, we liberalized the economy. But what we did not do was, really sort of work on those factors of production that manufacturing firms use. For instance, manufacturing firms need power. Manufacturing firms need land. Manufacturing firms need labor. They also need, to transport their what they produce, and their scale needs to be big enough so that their costs can be spread over a large denominator. Each of these are costs that manufacturing firms incur. And our policy has actually, we did not do anything on these factor markets to actually enable our firms to be competitive. What happens is our manufacturing firms, on each one of these inputs, they face anywhere between 15 to 20% higher costs than global firms. When you add all these up, you basically our firms are looking at almost double the cost. Even the most, creative entrepreneur can possibly reduce his or her costs by 20-30%. But when the cost is actually double, and this is something that actually has been a policy failure, which has been, which this government has tried to address. If you look at the labor reforms, actually the bill has been passed, in Parliament. The economies of scale, actually, we had the problem of dwarfism. Firms actually, growing old but not growing in size, thereby really reaping economies of scale. That has not happened. Had not happened, has now actually been changed, MSME definitions. The infrastructure spending that is happening has been happening in power and has been happening, in roads and railways, so that logistics costs, are taken care of. Now, when you put all this together, nobody has a magic wand. It's not going to happen overnight, but actually the momentum is very much there. If you look at the monthly economic report that the Ministry of Finance has put up, they show very clearly that private investment, that is new private investment into manufacturing, is really actually, is at a 14-year high. So clearly there is, good work that is being done, but there's a lot more work still to be done on manufacturing.
One final contentious issue is the charge of cronyism, the charge that few are benefiting at the many, that many of these infrastructure projects are going to only a handful of businessmen, and the real fear that it appears that many of our dollar millionaires are actually leaving the country, are looking to park their money outside India, whether it's in a Dubai, whether it's in a Singapore, and that should worry you. If all is so well, why is it that so many people are looking at options outside India? And do you really do you believe that the charge of cronyism should be looked at seriously or not?
So you've asked me two questions here. Let me take your second question first, which is about, people leaving, etc. I'll give you an honest assessment here.
And they seem to be fearful of the fact that the laws do not equally apply.
So let me, as I was saying, in terms of people basically wanting to leave the country. Look, I lived in the United States from 2001 to 2010. And now for the last 8 months, I'm living in the United States again. And, I've tweeted about this and I'm being absolutely honest. When I lived from 2001 to 2010, when I was seeing what is happening in the United States, I would not see something in India that made me say, oh, wow, this is actually much better in India than in the United States. But today, when I live in the United States, there are multiple things, including being able to actually use my phone to pay for something, actually, whether I drink a piece of coconut water or maybe a coffee. I can do that far better in India than actually in the United States. And just one aspect. So I don't know.
Our digital infrastructures, public digital infrastructures are big strength. Our fear is the way laws are applied in this country. Unequally applied, laws that are seen to be draconian, fear of punitive action, all of which is driving money out.
So as I said here, if you look at the evidence on this, if you normalize using the correct base, I don't think this phenomenon actually is as bad as you're portraying it to be. I will admit that I've not looked at the data on this particular, so I will not speculate, but I don't trust what you're actually telling me here.
Okay, I'm going by the reports that have come out. In 2023, 6,500 Indian millionaires expected to leave India, according to the Henley Private Wealth Migration Report. These are numbers coming out, but also anecdotally, when you talk to businessmen, there is a fear factor. There is a fear factor that will institutions operate in a equal, effective manner.
See, that's what I mentioned. When you look at raw numbers, right, you have to use a certain base, because just 6,500 in and itself, when you have population growing itself, without a certain normalization of the base, those numbers mean nothing really. You have to be careful in interpreting these numbers. It may be 6,500 actually, but if you go to a time, let's say 20 years back, where the population was very different, the number may have been 5,000 actually, so you can't really interpret that.
Arbitrariness in implementation of laws
that is something which actually state capacity, is an aspect that India has to work on. It's not something that has been a problem just now. It has been a problem always.
Right.
We need to really, work on improving state capacity significantly in the country. That's apart from, as I said, continued work on manufacturing, continued work on, some of the infrastructure, healthcare, education. Also, state capacity is something that requires work. I'm not going to deny that at all. Again, the spirit of what I'm trying to say is actually this, one, not acknowledging what is happening well and moving the targets all the time. Oh, growth happened. Okay, tell me about social expenditure. If I say social expenditure, okay, tell me about something else about the laws. And that's what, I'm trying to actually,
fair point, Mr. Subramanian.
So now let me come
what
to
about cronyism?
Cronyism. Yeah. So again, here, if you want to talk about cronyism, we could do a 2-hour session, because I've written a lot about this, the economic surveys earlier. The entire slowdown that we had, starting, before 2018-19 was because of the gargantuan amount of crony lending that was done up until 2013. So, again, this is an aspect that actually, we need to really be working on, moving forward. We, remember, are still a 75-year-old democracy. And, institutional checks and balances are evolving. Things are becoming clearly much, much better than what they were 10 years back. I don't think anybody would want to contend that this is something that is completely taken care of. There is still work to be done, but I can tell you, and having been in the North Block, and I speak my mind, I will tell you that, there is not a single instance of, public sector banks basically getting a telephone call and saying lend to X or lend to Y that has happened in the last 9 years. I think that is a step in the right direction, which is certainly not indicative of cronyism.
Therefore, as I conclude, a few days ago, we interviewed one of your colleagues, your Deputy MD, Geeta Gopinath, and she said India will be the world's third largest economy. By 27-28, it will contribute 15% of global growth this year and will be a key driver of economic growth in the years to come. Do you have any reservations, or do you believe that is the way to look at the Indian economy as a glass half full?
No, I would. So again, you're trying to put words in my mouth that I actually will not agree with. I'm saying that unlike some of the perennial critics, seem to believe, there's been a lot of good work that's been done. There are people who actually contend that, becoming the third is basically a foregone conclusion. I don't agree with that. Because, and when I say that, I actually say it in a positive way. We will become the third largest economy, but that will be because of the good work that's been done over the last 9 years, not mechanically, which is what some people make it seem like. Because
last 9 years or the last or the years since 1991.
We started in 1991, I think, and I give a lot of credit for the Prime Minister, then P.V. Narasimha Rao, for actually doing what he did. And I have written about it. The 1991 was a seminal moment. At the same time, the work that has been done over the last 9 years after the lost decade of 2004 to 2014 is seminal work as well. And
where
that
we
is
pulled out the maximum number of people out of poverty between 2004-14, what you're calling the lost decade. We made mistakes, blunders, no doubt.
Terrible blunders. Blunders, and I actually have mentioned, I think you know it very well, when the tide rises, without doing anything, boats go up. That whatever growth that we had at that time was because the global economy before the global financial crisis was just a rising tide. Without doing any work, with the policy paralysis as well, we got growth. So I don't think we need to claim credit for just what we got lucky about. Okay, when we come to the work that's happened over the last 9 years, that is what has gotten us to the fifth largest economy. Because if you recall the BRICS, that coinage that was done, of that BRICS, there are many countries. If you take Brazil, you look at China, Russia, they are basically not showing the kind of growth that India has shown. So to say that, the fifth was basically something, becoming the fifth largest economy was mechanical, and therefore becoming the third largest economy also is going to be mechanical, as some people who actually one would believe should know that economics are contending, is clearly wrong. We will become the third largest economy, and I have absolutely no doubt about that, because of the good work that we've done over the last 9 years, and hopefully will continue to do.
Dr. Subramanian, as always, combative and most educative. So thank you very much for joining us here on India Today.
Thank you.
That was the IMF Executive Director for India in Washington, D.C., Dr. Subramanian, giving us his perspective on the road ahead. So are we going to head towards Amrit Kal or not? You decide. Okay, let's turn though to another story which in a sense reflects what is wrong with our politics, the breaking down of politics, the battle in Andhra Pradesh, because there's no relief now for Telugu Desam chief, former Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu. A Vijayawada court has now rejected a petition filed by his family seeking for house custody, citing security concerns. Naidu, who was jailed yesterday, has now moved the Andhra Pradesh High Court for relief. His wife, Nara Bhuvaneshwari, has exhorted TDP workers to intensify their protests against the Jagan Mohan Reddy government. There are restrictions, though, on the movement of TDP MLAs, many of whom are under house arrest. And the battle lines are being drawn between Jagan Mohan Reddy and Chandrababu Naidu. Many MLAs confined to their homes since Saturday, the day Naidu was arrested. The YSRCP ruling government is defending Naidu's arrest, claiming that there is a fight within the TDP to take control of the party, and says that the scam against Mr. Naidu was being investigated fairly. And joining me now is Nara Lokesh, General Secretary of the Telugu Desam, son of Chandrababu Naidu. Appreciate your joining us, Nara Lokesh. You've written a very impassioned letter to the people of Andhra, claiming this is vendetta politics that you will fight against. Why do you say it's vendetta? The YSRCP says they are following the rule of law. They've gone on the basis of a criminal complaint and an FIR that was filed subsequently, accusing your father of setting up shell companies into which money was diverted.
Thank you, Rajdeep, for having me over. I mean, to be very clear, the project was envisaged about skilling the youth of Andhra Pradesh, and this project is not new to Andhra. This project has been implemented in other states. In fact, in 2013, the then Chief Minister of Gujarat, Narendra Modi ji, implemented the exact project there, and subsequently 6 other states also implemented the project. We just borrowed the model from there and implemented it. So we have not re-engineered it or redone anything new. It's the same project that's been implemented.
No, the accusation
if you also look at the
money.
remand report, it's quite clear that they haven't been able to prove.
The accusation is that that money which was meant for the project was diverted into shell companies through fake invoices.
See, if you look at it, the FIR was filed in 2021. It's now been 2 years. Charge sheet hasn't been filed. There are 36 people who have been accused before Mr. Naidu has been. All of them at different points of time have been interrogated by ED, IT and other regulatory agencies. And now if you see that everyone's out on bail, all their accounts are, are not frozen anymore. Money is flowing out. And in fact, ED has clearly stated that there's no money laundering. So I don't know where this government has come up with this entire model.
So you're saying there is no money trail, you're saying there's no money laundering, and yet your father at the moment is 2 weeks into judicial custody. Are you therefore saying that all of this is designed by Jagan Mohan Reddy because there are elections in Andhra Pradesh 6 months from now? Is that your direct accusation once again, that this is pure vendetta?
100%. This is pure vendetta politics. I mean, this model has been implemented in all other states by the same company, by the same people signing on the dotted line, at a price point lower than the other states. At a price point lower than the other states. And this government has not been able to prove, in their remand report also, that money has come to X, Y, Z. They have not been able to prove. So they have not been able to prove that money came to me or Mr. Naidu or any of the companies that we have floated. Nothing. Nothing is there in the remand report. So that's why we are very clear that it's nothing but vendetta politics.
But
and this is clear, keeping in mind that elections are around the corner. I mean, Mr. Jagan, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I mean, they know that. I mean, elections are around the corner. They want to sling mud at us. Jagan is a known, he's been accused in multiple cases. They're close to 38 cases against him, 10 CBI cases, close to 7 or 8 ED cases, and other cases are also on him. And he's now trying to accuse everyone around him, stating that they're also corrupt. And that's exactly what's happening. It's nothing but vendetta politics.
No, but at the end of the day, while the state CID has acted, there's also an ED inquiry going on in the same case, Lokesh. So the belief is that your father will have to answer questions in this case. If he's innocent, the law will take its own course. And apparently there are several other cases, according to the YSRCP government, where again there are allegations of corruption against Chandrababu Naidu and the TDP. So it's not just one case. They claim there will be several cases that are still to be investigated.
No, Rajdeep, can you explain this to me? It's been 4 years and 4 months since this government came into power. In the last 4 years, 4 months, have they been able to show with a document stating that here's the land or here's the money? They've not been able to show anything. The remand report does not have anything. And they're just simply blaming us. Nothing more than that.
Your father is now...
So, I mean, whatever cases that they claim that Mr. Naidu is involved, they can't, I mean, they have not been able to prove. It could be the so-called insider trading with regards to the land, Amravati land, or it could be fiber grid or any other case. They have not been able to prove tangibly that yes, here's the money trail, here's the money that's come into an account. They have not been able to prove so far.
But
and they won't be able to prove because we have not committed any crime.
No, but what seems to have happened at the moment, Lokesh, is that yes, elections are coming up in a few months, but there seems to be a cycle of vendetta politics. Jagan Mohan Reddy says that Chandrababu Naidu was out to get him, and somehow or the other target Jagan Mohan when Mr. Naidu was in power. Now the shoe is on the other foot, and the BJP is watching. They are watching this battle being played out between the two Andhra parties.
See, it's a known fact that Jagan used his father's office and amassed wealth. It's proven with documentary evidence that quid pro quo happened and money came to companies owned by Jagan and his family members. That's how he floated Sakshi Television, Sakshi Paper, started a cement plant, did many power projects, purchased a commercial property in Bangalore. This is all there. It's clear. It's established. In the case of Mr. Naidu, nothing like this is established. They haven't been able to prove. There are no documents available because we have not committed any crime.
My final question, therefore, to you, what next for you and the Telugu Desam? Could this be a body blow for the Telugu Desam if Chandrababu Naidu has to spend an extended period behind bars, or do you believe that you all will be able to garner sympathy as a result of all that has happened?
Justice is delayed, but truth shall prevail. There's no second thoughts about it. As Telugu Desam party, this is not the first time that we have faced such challenges. It was in the 80s when Mr. NTR, our founding father, was removed by Indira Gandhi illegally. Subsequently, we fought. He was reinstated as the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh. So this is not the first time that we've had such challenges, and I'm pretty certain that Telugu Desam Party will come together, our cadre will fight against this government, and the next Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh will be Mr. Chandrababu Naidu.
Okay. You're very confident that you believe that you will bounce back. Your father will become Chief Minister of Andhra once again. That's, of course, for the future. But for now, Nara Lokesh, for coming in and breaking your silence on this issue, thank you very much for joining me here on the news today. Okay, we heard from Chandrababu Naidu's son. As always on the news today, we believe that we must always hear all sides on the story. So let's go across straight now to Margani Bharat. He's YSRCP MP and TS Sudhir, political analyst based in Hyderabad, knows the inside out of Andhra politics. Sudhir, to you first, what's your sense? Is this vendetta 6 months before a big election, or is Chandrababu Naidu on the back foot on this one, given the fact that the YSRCP claims that they have enough evidence, according to them, to nail Mr. Naidu and make him an accused?
Well, Rajdeep, you used the word body blow. It's certainly a body blow as far as the TDP is concerned. And in fact, for almost 48 hours before he was actually arrested on Saturday morning, early on Saturday morning, Mr. Chandrababu Naidu was actually going around telling people that he is likely to be arrested. He has information that the CID could arrest him, but he was expecting that in a different case. So this was, in that sense, a bit of a surprise. But yes, 6 months before the elections, it has really pushed the TDP onto the back foot, because just like any other regional party, Chandrababu Naidu is the face of the party. He has been touring despite his age all over Andhra Pradesh. So in that sense, to confine him behind bars definitely would impact the TDP in a major way, which is why you see Nara Lokesh now taking the leadership position and the TDP cadre being asked to kind of galvanize and mobilize public opinion in its favor. But yes, this is going to be one of this most difficult political tests as far as Chandrababu Naidu and the TDP are concerned.
Let's come to the case, Sudhir, for our audiences across this India. When the initial agreement was signed with Siemens, 3,000 crores were to be invested by them and 371 crores by the AP government. The allegation in the remand application is the government released the 371 crores without Siemens releasing even 1 rupee. And the allegation is that 371 rupees was converted into cash through shell companies. That's what is the claim. Do you believe this is a strong enough case, or do you believe this is a case which typically will be seen to be driven more by vendetta?
Well, the CID will have to prove its case, because it has a lot of intricacies, financial intricacies, as to whether the amount was in fact released by Siemens, whether the Siemens head company was involved, or whether it was the entire handiwork of Siemens India. Like Lokesh pointed out, similar projects had been carried out in different other states of India, and pretty much the same model was done also in Andhra Pradesh, and skill development centers were set up. So whether that amount was in fact released, but much more important, Rajdeep, in this particular case is whether Chandrababu Naidu is the one who authorized the release of the amount, and whether part of that amount actually came back as kickbacks or any other devious way. So that is something which the CID will have to establish in this particular case, and that's really at the heart of this entire case.
Therefore, let me take it that to M. Bharat, YSRCP MP, because Bharat, the allegation that is being made by Lokesh just now in that interview, as well as the TDP, is that you haven't even proven a money trail. There is no linkage that is proving that the money has actually gone to Chandrababu Naidu. You're creating a suspicion, but without having actual proof. And the state CID, according to them, is working on the behest of Jagan Mohan Reddy to settle scores 6 months before an election. You had 4 years, 4 months to maybe build a case. Now in the last 6 months, you've suddenly arrested Chandrababu Naidu when he appears like a serious challenger to you.
So one thing, Rajdeep, one must understand, you are a senior journalist, you must be knowing, if it is a vendetta politics, we would have done, if Lokesh saying is true, we would have done 4 years back itself. Why now, before the 4 months of election at this junction?
He's saying because you are worried about Chandrababu Naidu bouncing back before the election, that's why you've gone for him. You haven't proven the money trail.
No. Perhaps they may get a lot of sympathy if it is a wrong case, if it is a false case. So one thing is very clear, we must closely observe the scam, what had happened earlier. In 2015, just give me 2 minutes of uninterrupted time. I'll just explain what exactly the total misuse of power has happened. So one thing, the Siemens India company, Siemens International, they are alleging that that Siemens International, the GOMS number 4 says the free aid of 90% investment by Siemens India company and as well as the design tech. So as far as when the CID has intervened and investigated this, and they have confessed that we have nothing to do with the Andhra Pradesh skill development, that MOU. We are not at all involved in this 90%. What they are saying, the 90%, the GO says the 90% of investment, as rather it is called to be a free aid. So not even a single penny has invested by Siemens International, and they've also confessed that we have nothing to do with this the agreement. And what the design tech the company has done, they have routed to the shell companies around about 70 companies. And here the primary conspirator is Mr. Naidu and his son.
No,
And
but he was
again,
not in the but I
the
must.
main
He was not in
beneficiary
the
is also
original.
Mr.
He
Naidu.
was not in the original FIR. His name seems to have been added. It almost seems as if this seems to be post facto, as an afterthought, that his name has now been added as accused number 37.
See, when the probe is going since 2 years, and initially the Andhra Pradesh state government didn't have investigated this. First, initially the GST intelligence have went through this investigation, and I'd like to mention who is Mr. Siri Shah. He was arrested in Pune with 212 shell companies, wherein this 70 shell companies, where the chief minister and Andhra Pradesh state government by the time, they have went with this scam and they have cautioned the state government. State government saying that these amounts been routed by the state's exchequer, and where all these 370 crores went. And my question here is, when they went with an agreement with the Siemens International, where is this 3,000 crores? They need to invest 90%. That says 3,000
So you're
crores
saying
has
that
to be
3,000
invested
crores was
in
never in. You're saying that 3,000 crores was never invested. Instead, 370 crores was routed into these shell companies, and many of these shell companies, you believe, is where Chandrababu Naidu's role is involved. My final question, therefore, to you. Is this going to be a big election issue? The worry is that it's not just, or the worry that the TDP has, not just this case, you've lined up a string of cases so that Mr. Naidu cannot campaign ahead of the elections. Is that true or not?
One thing, when the investigation is going on, we are having a clear evidences, and wherein the Mr. Naidu's involvement in this particular case, and he has made a pressure to the finance department to release the BRO, and wherein the note file, Mr. P.V. Ramesh, by that time he was an IAS officer or principal secretary, even the finance department, and this is the statement, this is the note file of Mr. P.V. Ramesh stating that Mr. Chandrababu Naidu, with the word of Chandrababu Naidu, we are releasing 370 crore rupees.
Right.
Is this not the siphoning of the money?
Okay, so you're saying that
evident.
note, ironically, from an officer now who is, of course, close to Jagan Mohan Reddy's own government, is what you're basing your complaint on. But I want a final word from you, Sudhir, very quickly. It comes at a time when Andhra goes to the polls. It's one of those rare states where both these major parties are, in a way, wooing the center. Do you see a role of the BJP very quickly in any of this? Or do you believe the BJP is just waiting and watching?
The BJP is waiting and watching. In fact, the BJP has it pretty good because any of the parties come to power. In fact, all the 25 MPs will end up supporting the BJP or the NDA. Jagan, in fact, is much more NDA than any of the NDA partners. So the BJP is waiting and watching. It really has nothing to lose in this entire battle which is being fought between the TDP and the YCP.
Okay, let's leave it there. I wish we had more time. We will keep tracking this story. I appreciate, Bharat, you joining us, giving us the YSRCP perspective on the case itself. And T.S. Sudhir, always good to see an old colleague. Let's take a break. When we return, we are turning to our Get Real India story, the show that brings you the stories that need to be told. Caste-based discrimination against a cook from the Dalit community comes to the fore in the state of Tamil Nadu. Is this what really Dravida identity wants to see? Back in a moment.
Weather forecast now. Delhi, maximum 36 and minimum 26 degrees. Mumbai, maximum 30 and minimum 27 degrees. Kolkata, maximum 33 and minimum 26 degrees. Bangalore, maximum 28 and minimum 20 degrees. Chennai, maximum 34 and minimum 27 degrees. Hyderabad, maximum 30 and minimum 22 degrees.
Welcome back. Let's turn to tonight's Get Real India story, where a tragic case of caste-based discrimination against a cook from the Dalit community has come to the fore in Tamil Nadu. 9 out of 11 students of a government primary school in Thoothukudi refused to eat food provided under the state's breakfast scheme because it was cooked by a Dalit woman. All of this comes at a time when the Sanatan Dharma debate is raging in Tamil Nadu and beyond. Get Real India.
Free breakfast for primary school children, an ambitious scheme launched by the MK Stalin government, has run into trouble in Uslampatti in Thoothukudi. At this government primary school, parents allegedly stopped children from eating food cooked by a Dalit. The issue came into notice after officials asked the employee, Munia Selvi, about the excess stock of food material in the school.
சேர்த்துருக்காங்க வேலைக்கு வந்து ஆனால் 25 வேலைன்னு சேர்ந்தேன். ஆனால் இன்னொரு யாரும் பிள்ளைங்களுக்கு 11 நாள் சமைச்சிருக்கேன், யாருமே சாப்பிட 2 பிள்ளைங்க சாப்பிட்றாங்க. அதிகாரி வந்து நீ என்கிட்ட இமெயில் கேள்வி சொல்லவே இல்லை, என்ன பேசாமல் அப்படின்னு சொல்லவே இல்லை.
The police, who failed to work out a solution on Monday, informed the district collector. On Tuesday, Kandimuri, the DMK MP from Thoothukudi, stepped in and met the parents. The MP also met Munia Selvi and had breakfast with the school children. This is the second instance of school children refusing to eat food cooked by Dalits that has become public. In another incident in Karur, the district collector had stepped in to resolve the issue.
DMK is also involved in damage control, where Thoothukudi MP Kanimori went to the school and consumed the food along with students, thereby saying that DMK will not allow any issue involving caste in the state of Tamil Nadu, as it comes at the moment of Sanatana Dharma controversy in the state of Tamil Nadu. Divyan, Pramod Madhav, for India Today.
For all the Sanatan Dharma political rhetoric, the truth of the matter is caste is still very much alive, and so is caste discrimination. Our first image tonight, as the new Parliament session gears up to hold its first a special session next week. Parliament employees will now don new traditional Indian uniforms during the forthcoming session. The design has sparked a political controversy. One of the outfits features the lotus, which, remember, is the party symbol of the BJP. To our second image, rather different image, streets of a Portuguese town being painted red after 2 tanks owned by a winery exploded, spilling 2.2 million litres of red wine onto the roads. That is quite a sight. It is red wine. Thanks for watching. Stay well, stay safe. Good night, Shubhratri, Jai Hind, Namaskar.
Elections, when all the parties are gearing up for elections here, and we see that this issue has come up while in the case was, the TDP's claiming case was registered long ago, and now when G20 is the main focus, this issue has been brought. So what do you say, madam? Is it a political vendetta that you can say, or is it, what do you call it?
No, definitely, just as we had raised our voice against the procedural aspects that had happened when they were arresting Sri Chandrababu Naidu ji, in the sense that they had not given him a notice, they did not take an explanation from him, his name was not in the FIR. It was later through a memo that his name was added into the FIR, and so there were great procedural lapses which BJP had questioned. But the rest of it, I think, since it's sub judice, and I think law will definitely, like for example, when Modi ji was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, and even Amit Shah ji, they were also at that point of time, Congress was in power in the center, and they were called for interrogation. I think Modi ji must have gone a dozen times there, but every time, even as the Chief Minister of AP, he sat through patiently, he gave his explanation, and Amit Shah ji was also kind of not allowed to even step into Gujarat at that point of time, but they proved themselves. So there is a procedure, and procedurally, I think they will have to face it.